My addiction, and it's weird to say publicly, but my addiction has been probably labeled in helping other people to win, which is what I say and is what is true to my heart. But why do I want other people to win? I have to peel the layers back well enough to know, why do I want other people to win? And it's because I want to be seen as a winner. And I want to be seen as a winner because my childhood or my DNA or my parents or my upbringing, they led me to believe that I wasn't a winner. And so I'm trying to change my stars. And I mask it as me saying, I want you to win, which is 100% true. And there's depth and truth behind why I want you to win. So I, of course, want you to live your best life. I want you to not have to go through some of the crap I've gone through. And I need to feel validated and important because I was a part of that.
Erik, welcome to Point of Impact. So glad you're here.
Oh, man, it's good to be here. What a beautiful day. I don't know where people are listening to and what time of day it is, but it's beautiful where I'm at. So how about that?
Well, I'm in, you're up in Canada, or practically Canada,
Well,
as far as
North
I can
Dakota.
tell.
I live in Fargo, North Dakota, which is essentially Canada for most people. Yeah, we are just a couple of hours from the border, but it is far from all the beaches of the world and far from all the mountains. But at least we have a lot of prairie land and sugar beets. So very exciting.
Well, I'm in the Florida Panhandle where it's starting to warm up, and I'm realizing that my HVAC system needs servicing, and I live just a couple miles from the sugar white sands of the Emerald Coast, and they tell me it's gorgeous. But by the way, Canadian bacon is not bacon; it's ham.
Yeah, thank you. First of all, I feel like we're now brothers connected because I am quite salty at the Canadians trying to name their own bacon as bacon. Ain't nobody as delicious as good old pig bacon that is not Canadian bacon. Get out of here, Canada. We don't want your crap.
We are in accord there, and it's Canada's. The Hawaiian pizza is Canada's fault, by the way. That's their fault. Anyways, I'm really excited to have you on. You are full of energy, passion, and you're just an incredibly prolific entrepreneur. And you're a giver.
Thanks, man.
But you had to go through a transition of your own. Dealt with family loss early on when you were younger, and addiction and all that. Why don't you, before you were making millions and helping others become millionaires? What were some of the challenges? What was the little bit of the background before we get into that?
Absolutely. I think that a lot of people who find success in their life do so because they have a chip on their shoulder and they're trying to prove something. And that's been my story most of my life. I've been trying to give honor to and prove love to my mother, and trying to prove that I am not my father's son. An interesting compilation of both of those. My parents at the age of 2, they weren't at the age of 2, but I was at the age of 2. My parents divorced, and my dad all but abandoned our family. And I'd see him every couple of years. And when he'd come, he'd stumble in drunk and just not a great man to be around. And so orphaned by him, essentially left with just my mom. And my mom was a very talented woman, but also played scared most of her life. And so we lived one foot in the welfare bucket, and went from trailer trash to living in a dumpy apartment building. And then when I was 10 years old, my dad got hit by a wrecking ball and knocked off of a roof and broke his back and was disabled and paralyzed. He was disabled, not paralyzed, but unable to work for the rest of his life. And so we got 8 years of child support from that, what he had never paid. And that allowed us to buy our very first and only house, which was a $54,000 townhouse, which was like the Ritz-Carlton for us from where we were at. And I watched my mom work 3 jobs just so I didn't have to wear Payless shoes. And so never missed a thing. She was just like this super woman. But at the age of when I was 16, when I was a sophomore in high school, I went on this mission trip with my church, literally like melted me and broke my heart. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is what I want to do, is I want to serve people, and I want to love people, and I want to give to people, and I want to support people. And I came back, and driving back from the airport, I asked my mom, I'm like, hey, you had a doctor's appointment when I was gone. How'd that go? She's like, well, it didn't go so well. And she was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer, which eventually took her life 5 years later. And so I went from this like high and clarity moment of my entire life, feeling like I knew what I'm here on this earth for, and that is to impact and to make a difference. And then my only parent, my caretaker, my everything was on her deathbed. And in fact, the cancer that she had was cervical cancer, and you get cervical cancer from HPV or genital warts, which is a weird thing to talk about, that my mom had an STD, but she contracted it either from one of my dad's many affairs, or there was a time that my sister was born, but I wasn't. She's 4 years older than I was. My dad got a phone call saying, Larry, you need to come into work. He was a roofer. And so he went in, and the guys that made the phone call broke into our trailer and robbed my dad of all of his drugs and money, because he was a drug dealer, robbed him of all those things, and then raped my mom. And so my mom had this 5-year cancer battle, and eventually it took her life in 2001 from my dad. And so my dad was, in my mind early on, when I was only seeing things in black and white, as my dad murdered my mom. And it was I don't believe that to be true anymore. I understand the contrast and the different things that led to all this. And he never intended on being an asshole. Right? No, I don't think anybody sets out to do that. He was a broken, weak, selfish man who was trying to protect himself and didn't recognize the harm of his actions or inactions. And so I found a lot of grace for him. I found a lot of peace and forgiveness for him. But that came 6 months prior to him passing away in 2012. When I graduated from college, and my mom died when I was in college. When I graduated from college, my church had just like totally wrapped their arms around me and supported me, and eventually gave me employment as well. So I was doing youth ministry for 8 years, and I had this kid in my youth ministry who had an estranged dad and a broken relationship with him. And he came to me one day. He's like, hey, my dad's like super sick. He's going to die. And like, I have all these emotions and all these complications and all these feelings around it. And I challenged him. I'm like, Graham, dude, you got to find forgiveness, not just for your father, but for you. Because if he's gone, and if he leaves this earth, well, you're going to kick yourself, and you're going to feel a lot of regret and remorse for not having taken action on that. And Graham looked at me, and he's like, all right, Hatch, you first. I'm like, whoa. This is not about me. This is about you, Graham. He's like, no. He's like, I'm talking to you because you have issues with your dad, and I thought that you would understand it. He's like, if you want me to do something big, you got to do something big first. And I'm like, oh, man. Because I don't often show up for myself. I show up for other people, but I don't often show up for myself. And I prayed through it, and I wrestled through it, and I recognized that I had found forgiveness for my father. It wasn't just lip service, and I wasn't just saying it. And so I wrote him a letter, and I forgave him, and I asked for forgiveness as well, because I had said and done things that I'm not proud of. And when it all came to be, Aaron, I mailed that letter to my dad, and he died 6 months later. And so the healing process, it didn't just happen. It was something that was happening over time. Day after day, I was gaining a greater maturity of myself, an understanding of what it was like to be not a real man, which the world teaches us, but instead to be a good man, which is who I wanted to be. And being a good man meant that I had to find forgiveness, and I had to have some grace in how I operated. And I've gone on now and have built my business on a lot of these principles, with the chip on my shoulder for trying to prove to the world who my father was or wasn't, and trying to prove to the world who my mother was. But ultimately now I'm swirling and messing with all sorts of personal identity issues as I continue to face challenges and obstacles, and at the same time serving at the highest capacity that I can with my calling. So that is my backstory in a nutshell.
There's so much to unpack there, though. But Dad getting hit by a wrecking ball. Don't think I've ever heard of that happening outside, cartoons. But
Yeah, that and Miley Cyrus. Yeah.
thanks for taking one for the team, Dad. Uh, and your mom dealing with stage 4 cancer for 5 years.
Yeah, I, at the age of 16 when my mom got diagnosed, and she went through more chemotherapy and radiation than is allowed on humans. Her organs were literally like melted together. I was a kid who was super involved in school and extracurricular activities. I had a job working 20 hours a week, and I was my mom's only caretaker. And so I would get her out of bed and move her to the couch in the morning. I would prepare meals for her. I would clean her up and get her to bed at night. And then I would be 16 as well. So like I was a 40-year-old in a 16-year-old's body, living with a whole world of responsibilities and this idea to serve somebody else. And it wasn't about them repaying me. It was about the commitment that I had to love them. And that, I mean, that's my philosophy still on how I lead and show up for people all the time. Is it's not about what they can give me. I just know that I'm called to do some good in this world, and I find my identity through that.
Well, it was great that you got to, for you, got to forgive your dad before he passed. That must have been, I'm sure you'd thought of that before, and a few times since then.
I think about it often still, because I freaking hate him, but I love him. Like Tony Robbins has some really powerful things that he says, and I've never gone to a Tony Robbins conference. I've read one of his books and I've watched his Netflix special, so that's about as much Tony Robbins as I've digested. But he says something in his Netflix special. It's called "I'm Not Your Guru," that stopped me in my tracks. And it was this young woman who was talking about her father and her daddy issues. And then he says, if your father played the role he was, or if the father was the man that you wanted him to be, you wouldn't be the person that you are today. And then he says, everything is happening for you, not to you. And if my dad was the man that I wanted him to be growing up, I wouldn't be the man that I'm proud to be today. I wouldn't have the drive and the passion and the character that I'm working so hard to develop every day. I wouldn't have that. I would have been void of much of that if he would have been the father that I wanted. And so, yes, I have forgiven my father and I have let go of that. And I still hold on to anger and resentment for what he wasn't. And yet I'm mature enough now to understand that if he was who I wanted him to be, you and I probably wouldn't be talking right now.
You said it there with the happening to you versus happening for you. And I've said this many times myself, and I think the argument behind your dad being who you wanted him to be versus who he really was, and who you are and who you wanted to be, it comes down to acceptance, and that you're not in a stagnant, we're always changing, and life is all about perspective, right? And you're still becoming the person, you're still becoming the man that you're supposed to be. So but that's like that growth versus fixed mindset, where if it's happening to me, I can't do anything about it. But if it's happening for me, now you're opening your mind to creativity. What is this opportunity I've been given? So I think that's an excellent perspective there.
Thanks, bro.
No, you were taken in by the church, by your community, found forgiveness, and then I guess as an extension of serving your mom through those years, and the influence in the church, you began to serve in the ministry, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. The amount of fatherless young men that I had the privilege to serve, and motherless young men and women, and it wasn't just boys or girls. I got to serve all ages, all different places and races and all the things. But my brokenness was the glue that tied us together, not my wholeness and not my perfection, not the things that I had in the trophy case. It was the brokenness that I felt so embarrassed and defeated by that created the connection and the trust that was necessary for me to do good ministry.
But that brokenness, it found another outlet too, didn't it? And an unhealthy one.
Rephrase the question. I'm not sure I caught that, Aaron.
Well, you had to deal with addiction, right? And it started off innocent enough. It started off as an income, a supplement, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So my addiction was never to substances, but it was to gambling. And I'm 45 years old as we record this today. And I was a part of the internet poker boom. People around my age are like, yeah, nodding their heads like, yeah, I totally remember when the World Series of Poker and Chris Moneymaker were this thing where this guy who had no real poker experience whatsoever beat the world's best poker players. And it was all broadcast on ESPN. And all of a sudden, every 20-year-old like me had a chance to access poker from the comfort of their computer and their dorm room or their apartment or their house. And so I became addicted to gambling. Unbeknownst to me, it was an income producer first. And so when my mom passed away, and even though we were poor, she also had the eyes and the ears to know that she wanted to set up my sister and myself better than where we were at. She had taken out some life insurance policies. And when she passed away, we inherited enough money for me to pay off my college loans and for me to pay off my car. And then I was left with about $10,000, and I put $5,000 into an IRA, and the other $5,000 I used to gamble and to be an irresponsible 21-year-old. And that money that I started to gamble with turned into more and more and more because I was a pretty good poker player. Poker was a skill of reading people. Being an entrepreneur and being a poker player, same thing. Exact same thing as you're reading situations, you're reading opportunities, you're trying to figure out how much to bet and when to bet and how fast to go and how slow to go. And it's all the same skill set. And I was a pretty good poker player to the tune of it became my main income in my life. Even though I was working at the church full time, I quietly had this behind the shadows poker career. Cause dude, I am like a walking contradiction. And I understand that, like, I love Jesus, but I cuss a little and I'm a gambling addict and like all these things. So, as I'm doing this, all of a sudden I start losing some money because I'm playing for the rush and I'm not playing the skill. I'm playing for the feeling and I'm not playing the person. And so I start losing some money, and then I've never done meth, but I can't imagine somebody that takes meth is like, man, I sure could not crave and fix this meth addiction by taking more meth. Like, I don't think it adds up that way that you can take more meth to get rid of your meth addiction. But gambling is this like slippery slope. It's like, man, I just lost $1,000, but if I bet $1,000 on this next hand, I can get back that $1,000 I just lost. And so it was this web that I was weaving, and all of a sudden I woke up riddled in shame, and I couldn't do it anymore because I had racked up behind my wife's back. This was 2008 while I was making $28,000 a year as a youth pastor. Making $28,000 a year, I had racked up $70,000 in credit card debt behind my wife's back. And my wife was she was the sugar mama in our relationship because she was a teacher and she was making $32,000. And so 70 grand in credit card debt at a 22% interest rate was paralyzing. And I came clean to her and told her what I had done, because I was doing this almost completely behind her back. She was unaware of me having this affair with money and this affair with gambling. And I came clean, and by the grace of God, she stayed with me, and we went into marriage counseling, and I went into counseling and she went into counseling, and we got credit repair, and I went into Gamblers Anonymous, and I did all the things. And because of real estate, which is my first entrepreneurial profession, I I jumped in and eliminated all that debt in 18 months and never missed a payment on anything and kept a credit score of 750 to 800. And like, I was able to take the mistakes that I made, and instead of just throwing my hands up and saying like, screw this, and file for bankruptcy and just press that restart button, I chose to lean into the mistakes that I made and to try to be somebody that faced their mistakes instead of ran from their mistakes. And I use this. There's a writing that I found online of this farmer in Colorado, this rancher in Colorado, excuse me. And on his ranch, he has bison and he has cows. And when storms come in, storms usually come in from the west. They move west to east. And when these storms come in, cows, they would run east. They'd run to try to run away from the storm and avoid the pain that they're in. Well, when they run east, it of course prolongs their time in the storm because they're actually moving with it when they think they're trying to avoid it. Where bison, when they would see storms come in from the west, they would actually head west. They would run into the storm and they would face it head on. And although it was a harder punch for them, their time in the storm was that much less. And I had been a dumb cow running east from my problems for a long time. And I ran from my gambling. I didn't admit to it. And I kept on brushing it under. And I kept on trying to gamble more to get rid of my gambling problem. And every time I ran east, it caused more pain for other people. But then I had to face it and I had to head west and I had to go at it head on. I had to treat it like I was a bison. And oh my gosh, it hurt so much to confess and to wear that shame and that embarrassment for the choices that I had made. But I got through it so much faster and I was so much stronger for having headed west and for having faced my problems head on instead of just avoiding it. Because I didn't want to be my father, Aaron. I didn't want to be the guy who was unaware of the wake that he left and the pain that he caused other people. And I wanted to be somebody that faced it and said, I'm the idiot, I'm the dummy, and I need to get better and I need your help to get there.
It never feels good to say I messed up. To admit our mistakes, and it's tough, especially for driven alpha males. It was supposed to be the superheroes of the family, right? We're supposed to have all the answers, and it was supposed to be born with them, or learn them through hard knocks. But we would like to think we're infallible. But absolutely right. Ripping off that Band-Aid and just getting it done is so important. You mentioned real estate, though. I know you've talked about this in the past, that you had no interest in real estate until it was kind of a necessity. How did it first get started? How did it first get started?
I got my real estate license in the end of 2005, started my career in 2006, and I was full-time in the ministry. I was a full-time professional gambler. I was emceeing and DJing wedding dances and high school dances. I was giving guitar lessons to a bunch of kids, and I got my real estate license. And I got my real estate license because I couldn't make enough money to fund my gambling addiction. So it was a really slippery slope. I had a buddy who actually first taught me to gamble when I was 15 years old. I had a buddy who was my realtor. My wife and I were engaged to be married in 2005 and married in 2006. And so we're house shopping with him. And I tell him quietly, like, hey, Jace, I'm pretty broke, man. I got a little bit of money here for the equity that I have in my house, but otherwise, like, I'm not making enough. And he goes, Hatch, you're good with people. You should sell houses. And it was a prophetic statement in my life. And I said, okay, sure. So I got my real estate license, didn't hesitate. I just jumped in figuring, real estate sales are going to be easy because I'm well known in our community. I've, for the most part, been in a respectable position. I'm so glad social media didn't exist when I was in college because that may be a different story. But nonetheless, I'm working hard and serving people at the church, and I'm involved in my community. And so people know and like me and trust me. And so I'm sure they're going to buy houses from me and sell houses with me. So I got my real estate license realistically to fund my gambling addiction. My first year, I sold no houses, so it cost me a couple $1,000. And I foolishly made the mistake that just because I was known meant that I was trusted and validated in a real estate space. It was the farthest thing from the truth. And so I had a lot of work to do to earn people's trust on that kind of business accord. And so I gave it all my energy. I literally, there are 10 years of my life, Aaron, where I worked 90 to 110 hours a week. Different jobs, different passions, doing everything within my power. And by the way, those of us that are privileged to be parents and those of us that are privileged to be husbands and wives, we're working 90 to 110 hours a week as well, because we're working 40 hours at work and we're working 60 hours with our kids. And like, we're all that busy. I was just that busy because I had a wife that was willing to let me cook and let me sacrifice. And I didn't have kids yet. And so I gave everything I had. I sacrificed friendships. I sacrificed health. I sacrificed so many things to chase after business. And so my real estate career started to compound, and I first used it to get rid of the debt that I had accrued. Then it was 2010, and my wife and I were trying to have kids. And so we were practicing a lot. One of my favorite things to do, I highly recommend it. If you guys tried practicing having kids, it's so fun. So as we were doing that, we weren't able to get pregnant. And so we went to the doctor, and the doctor was like, oh, got some issues here. And so then it was the IUI route, which is just a whole bunch of shots and a not sexy way to try to get pregnant. And that didn't work. And now all of a sudden we had used all of our health insurance. And the only way that I could become a dad is if I funded it. Took a lot of money. And my job in the ministry and my wife's job as an educator didn't pay the bills for all that. And so I gave more and more time to real estate. Real estate was originally the spot that I used to make a bunch of money, to fix my problems, and to start my family. Now, by the grace of God, we have 2 kids. One came in our 4th round of IVF after years and years of pain and miscarriages and embarrassment and shame and $100,000 and like all these things. My daughter Finley now is 10 and a half years old. And then I snuck one past the goalie, and my son Simon is 8.5 years old. So like we have this beautiful, incredible family, and I'm tired of kids now. So I got a vasectomy because I just said, I'm done with that now. We're good. But this all has compounded and led to figuring out like this real estate career for me was originally just about money. And I left the ministry to tend to growing my family, and I was pursuant of money. Well, now I have a bunch of money, and I'm making sure that my career has the influence and the impact that my ministry once had. And so I am doing my best to do good in the world through a for-profit business. And in fact, it's more impactful and easier in which to do so than it was working for a non-profit organization.
After these messages, we'll be right back. I'd like to thank the sponsor of this episode, Extraordinary Delights, EODfudge.com. Extraordinary Delights is a disabled veteran, family-owned small business making handcrafted fudge and other sweet treats for the chocolate-loving patriots just like you. Go to EODfudge.com and check out some of our delicious flavors like triple threat chocolate with or without walnuts, mint dark chocolate, strawberry and creamy white chocolate, or my personal favorite, American Pick-Me-Up, an all-American version of tiramisu. While you're there, go to the apparel store and check out our awesome t-shirts, polos, and the baddest tactical apron on the market. You see me wear on the TikTok show, Aaron Hale's Cook Without Looking. So, right now, go over to EODfudge.com and pick out some fudge, other sweet treats for that patriot in your life with a sweet tooth. That's EODfudge.com. EODfudge.com. And now, back to the show. So you had 2 kids, and then you took the firing pin out of the gun.
Sure did.
But gosh, talk about a guilt trip on the kids. Like, you don't know how hard I had to work just to bring you into this world, much less feed and shelter and dress you after Dad, I don't want to
Aaron,
hear
Aaron,
about how hard you
I'm
work.
not a guy. I'm not a guy that cries easy. I used to be a really big crier, and then when my mom passed away when I was 21, like nothing hurts that bad. And so I'll get a couple tears in my eyes every once in a while, but really my tear ducts have dried up. It's a very peculiar thing that I talk to my therapist about a lot. But I was flying back on the plane. We were in Hawaii last week for spring break with my wife and my kids and my mother-in-law. And I brought my mother-in-law because I am trying to get brownie points to be her favorite son-in-law. But nonetheless, I'm watching on Netflix Andrew Schultz's. Well, he's a hilarious comedian. He has this new Netflix special called Life, and for 60 minutes he talks about infertility, and he talks about the IVF process, and he talks about jacking off at the doctor, and like all these incredibly hilarious, funny things. And at the end of his special, he puts this video up of the whole process, and then when his daughter is born, and like I'm getting goosebumps and tears in my eyes just talking about it, because sitting next to me on the plane, I look over is my daughter, and she has no freaking clue of what it took, of the years and the years. And my job was to go and jerk off at a doctor's office and to get my daughter and to go to work to pay. I didn't have to wear the cloak of shame and the heaviness of having lost those kids like my wife did. Her toll is 1,000 times heavier than mine. She just doesn't like a microphone like I do. So that's why I tell the story. But yeah, my daughter has no clue. And I looked over at my daughter and my eyes just like filled up with tears.
I actually went through the same process with
Really?
with a first son. So yeah, I'm totally familiar with that.
Yeah. It hit me. It hit me so hard because it's just life now.
Mm-hmm.
It's just
How old
life
are
with
they
my
now?
kid, but 10 and a half and 8.5. And it's just life with them now, but it was and is like the most raw, real kind of pain that we oddly don't talk about very much. I'm unafraid of talking about it now because there's not pain, there's just joy. But man, there's some people right now that are in that pain, and it is a cloak of shame. I mean, there should be no shame involved with it, but it is just brokenness that people wear.
Mm-hmm. And so you discovered real estate as a way to, keep your family afloat and pay off the debts and all of that. And from I don't know, did you turn it into a passion? You were really driven. Did you maybe trade one addiction for another?
Oh, that's a good question. I've never cared about real estate. Up until a couple of years, I didn't know that sheetrock and drywall were the same thing. Like, without growing up with a dad, like I never learned about general maintenance and house care and all those other things. We lived in a crappy apartment and trailer, and so you just kind of dealt with the crap that you had. So I didn't know anything about the actual physical structures and beings of real estate. I know enough now to be dangerous, but not enough to get myself into trouble. But I recognized when I actually started to understand this career that this career was still about serving people. And you asked me if I've traded one addiction in for the other. Like my addiction, and it's weird to say publicly, but my addiction has been probably labeled in helping other people to win, which is what I say and is what is true to my heart. But why do I want other people to win? I have to peel the layers back well enough to know why do I want other people to win, and it's because I want to be seen as a winner. And I want to be seen as a winner because my childhood or my DNA or my parents or my upbringing, they led me to believe that I wasn't a winner. And so I'm trying to change my stars. and I mask it as me saying, I want you to win, which is 100% true. And there's depth and truth behind why I want you to win. So I, of course, want you to live your best life. I want you to not have to go through some of the crap I've gone through. And I need to feel validated and important because I was a part of that.
Well, you said early on that you did this. you would do mostly for you. A lot of it, like the accomplishments, the success, the money, as you started becoming a winner. So when did the transition come? When did the realization come to start doing this for those next to you?
Chapter one for me, at least in the real estate career, was about money. And money was a way in which to solve my problems. And then it was also a falsified Trojan horse of being of worth and value to the world. And so I first chased after money. That was the first thing I chased after. And I did so for probably 10 years. And then I transitioned to valuing time more than I valued money. And so in those 10 years when I was valuing money the most was when I was working 100 hours a week. And then that changed and grew and manifested. And as it changed and grew and manifested, I found myself chasing after time. And so I was then 40 to 60 hours a week in my businesses. And I was still addicted and still am, frankly. But the time that I had that I was getting back was now for, like, I made the switch the moment my daughter was born, and I was making sure that I was going to be the father that I never had for her. And so in most things in life, I'm like a 6 out of 10, but I'm like a 9.5 out of 10 as a dad. Like, I'm super proud of who I am for my kids. So chapter 1 was about money. Chapter 2 was about time. Chapter 3 has been about influence, that I want to make an impact and I want to serve people. And I want, again, my own selfish needs, wants, and desires are behind so much of that. And yet I also get life in my lungs when I can help people to discover their greatness and to step into their anointment and how incredible that they can be. I have no space and place for people that want to play mediocre and small in this world. And so chapter 3 has been about influence, and I'm able to do influence more because I have more time. But I'm actually at a really unique spot here, Aaron, and it's chapter 4 now. And chapter 4 is about peace.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm still learning through this. I'm in it in real time, but I don't feel like I'm performing quite like I used to. I don't. And my wife has acknowledged, she's such a truth teller in my life, and she's like, Erik, you're different. You're quieter. You're a little more reserved. You're almost more thoughtful than just the guy that blurts out and says, "Look at me, look at me." And I think it's because I'm comfortable with my place in life, and I'm at peace with my health. In the last 2.5 years, I've lost about 110 pounds and have taken my life back and have healed on the inside and strengthened myself on the outside from so many things. And it's been a lot of therapy and a lot of group work and a lot of self work. And I'm just healthier, and the reflection of health is peace. And so I'm able to do more with less because I'm at this peaceful place now and I don't have to perform quite as much.
Well, thank you for that vulnerability there, the admission. That's a hard-earned grace you found yourself in, that peace. It took a lot of work, a lot of transformation. So
yeah, the work is still happening. Yeah, I'm closer than I ever have been, and still have a chasm that I'm trying to close the gap on every day.
Well, again, nothing is stagnant. Nothing stays the same for very long. So we're usually moving towards something. So it sounds like transformation is been in a good direction. You've learned quite a few lessons. You've helped others to learn theirs. So what is it that what's the vision for the future? What is that you've learned? You're stepping into this peace. So what gets you excited?
I have a buddy who, when we had the conversation, he was 48, had a career in real estate. And he told me, he's like, "Hey, I'm retiring this year." I'm like, "Excuse me? You're 48. I think I was 42 at the time or so. I'm like, you're 48. How is that possible?" And he said something to me that just hit me between the eyes. And he said, "Well, I've stopped moving the goalposts." So I say, what? He's like, yeah, I figured out how much money I needed for my life, and I figured out what I needed to accomplish to have the life and the freedom that I want. And so I just stopped moving the goalposts. And I'm like, oh, that's why I'm consistently not satisfied, is because I always move my goalposts. Like I remember when I was like, man, if I could only make $20,000 a year, then everything's going to change. And then it was like, if I can only make 50,000, then if I can only make 100,000, if I only can make $250,000, and then like it just continues to compound and compound. And I was delaying stepping into who I wanted to be until I hit a certain benchmark, until I hit a certain point. And I recognize now, of course, looking in the rearview mirror, but I recognize the flaw in that philosophy of waiting to and wanting to hit a certain point in order to then become or be. And so understanding that I need to be that person now, and I need to not wait, means that I shouldn't just wait till I hit the goalpost and then even move the goalpost further and move the goalpost further. And so now I find myself saying, like, not what am I striving for? Simon Sinek has a book called The Infinite Game, where he says that the game that we actually play in life is not a game where we win and lose. There are wins and losses throughout, but there's not a scoreboard, and it's this constant like pursuit of. And so I'm chasing influence, and I'm chasing peace, and I'm chasing time, and I'm chasing wealth. Those are all things I'm still chasing, but I'll never make enough money to feel like satisfied. I won't. Money is a Trojan horse. It is something that introduces you to things, but if you don't have happiness, if you don't have joy, if you don't have love, if you don't have time, it's an empty vessel. Yeah. And so I'm chasing a bunch of things, bro. And the thing I'm most excited about right now, this season of life, is partnerships. Because I did the entrepreneurial game for a long time, and I hit some benchmarks in life that I never thought I'd hit. But winning alone is nowhere near as valuable as winning together. And in a lot of circles, I was the guy. I was the guy that people would look to maybe as the leader, or the one with the most experience, or the one with the most perspective. Having been an entrepreneur now for almost 20 years, like I'll be the one that a lot of people turn to. And that's a cool, fun place to be. But I got to find some people to follow, and I got to find some people to partner with, and I got to find some people that are going to help challenge me and elevate my life. Because I only know the 4 chapters. I have no idea what chapter number 5 is. Maybe there's not even a chapter 5, but 1 through 4, I got to on my own with some valued relationships. And this next section of my book, while all the other sections still exist, the next section of my book is a partnership section, and it's figuring out how much life can I get and how much life can I give by finding the right partnerships.
And what comes after peace? Apotheosis. Was it apotheosis? Enlightenment. It
might be. Honestly, there's an activity called the flywheel, and the flywheel is like, if I do this one thing, it's going to lead to this next thing, and then it's going to lead to this next thing. But the flywheel is a circle, and it all comes back to itself. And so maybe section 4 of the flywheel is peace. And when I do peace really well, it's going to lead to wealth again, the next chapter of wealth, which is then going to lead to the next chapter of time, which is then going to lead to the next chapter of influence, which is then going to lead to the next chapter of peace. So I might be starting the flywheel all over again, or chapter 5, maybe a totally unique thing that I don't even know exists yet.
Well, maybe you take that momentum that you've built up with your flywheel, and you just change the trajectory a little bit. You find something new that you can pour your energy into. Speaking of entrepreneurs, and me being, having also the ADHD, the blindest guy with shiny object syndrome. I love finding new projects, pouring myself into it, starting a fire, and letting somebody else handle it after that. I'm going to go find something new and exciting, but if you've got the momentum going with the businesses, the investments, and you've got the money, the peace, the freedom, the time, then you can choose where to spend your time and that treasure. But you find what fulfills you. When you were talking about your friend who said you stopped moving the goalpost, I was reminded of that parable of the the businessman that went on vacation to Mexico and chartered a fishing boat for the day with a guy smoking. Found a guy, was a fisherman, who was smoking cigars, drinking wine, and playing his guitar with his friends, and went fishing with him. He says, how do you live this kind of life? If I go fishing for the day and I bring back enough to feed my family and sell the rest. Well, if you bought a bigger boat, you could probably bring in more fish. Then what? Well, then you could sell it at the market. Then what? Well, you could take that extra money and buy more boats and have a fleet. Then what? Well, then you would probably need to maybe start a cannery, and I could, help you find the financing for that, and on and on. And he says, well, to what end? Why would I do all this?
So you can go fishing with your friends.
So you could, so you could hang out with your friends, smoke cigars, and drink wine, and play your guitar. But you stop. Why do you need to do all that busy stuff if you're already doing what you enjoy? If it's spending time with your family, you have the freedom, you're making enough to live the life you want.
I've pondered on that, because I love that you shared that, because it rings so true to my soul when I find myself like, why the hell am I doing all this? And it's because I love winning.
Mm-hmm.
I am addicted to progression. It is my favorite thing, is to overcome, is to achieve. I don't need to achieve for the ribbons. I don't need to win, but I need to not lose. And the only way I know to not lose is to win, not to maintain. Maintenance feels like loss for me. So that means I have to constantly be figuring out, how do I win in life? And I won in the aforementioned chapters, right? And although the victories could be bigger, they could be sweeter, they could be longer lasting, I feel like I'm consistently not chasing a goalpost. I'm playing an infinite game. And the infinite game is, I want to improve myself, and I want to improve the world as I get there. And I want to laugh hysterically and drink wine and play the guitar and fish while I do it.
I have a similar type drive. I became, an EOD technician, a bomb technician. One of the military's most dangerous jobs. And then, after my injury, I wasn't satisfied with just being, a blind guy. I became the first blind, deaf person to finish the world's toughest foot race. But the thing is, and I'm also always looking for ways to challenge myself. One of the toughest things, one of the toughest challenges I have, is trying to be the best dad and husband I can be, because it isn't a brute force thing like running. It takes nuance. My oldest is 14, and he wants to get a job like delivering pizzas. Okay, you live in a family of entrepreneurs. We don't work by the hour. What if you started a business with your buddies? And I gotta pull back. I gotta say, what, maybe he does need the that under the table cash hourly job first, and then maybe a W-2 type of thing, just to learn how to clock in and show up for work and dress appropriately. And he needs to go through all these stages, and I gotta stop, you know, trying to get them to, that like stage 4 or 5 in the progression, but it's a challenge. It's one of the toughest things I've ever experienced. And that includes learning a computer without, patience or my eyesight. But um, so you've certainly earned the ability to choose, and I think that's one of the things we always have to remind ourselves is that life is just full of decisions. It's one decision after another. So, where do you feel your decisions will take you next?
I'm recognizing, and I shared this earlier, that one of my favorite things to do is to call people into their greatness, and that includes myself. And that my playing small and your playing small doesn't serve the world, and that we get more life when we give more life. There is one place that I feel called to more than anything else, and if someone's going to recognize their greatness and they're going to recognize their talent, that has to be for something, and it has to be, I think, to make a difference for others instead of just for yourself. And for me, I found my clearest identity and place in life when I've given the most away. My time, my energy, my talents, certainly my cash. And I go back to when I worked for the church 20 years ago. And we were taking these mission trips similar to the one that I went on where I fell in love with Jesus, and I wanted to have this life to serve people. And so quickly do we abandon our 16-year-old intentions because we're filled with excuses. And I worked at a place for 8 years that allowed me to still live in the heart of a 16-year-old, and oftentimes the maturity of a 16-year-old. But I had this chance to introduce people to things that would totally transform their life. And so we would do all these mission trip works and experiences, and would travel around the country and the world serving. And I had this little old church lady who grabs my arm and she said, "Erik, why aren't you serving anybody here?" I was like, like that, like my literal job is to serve people here, but like when I'm introducing these kids, we're bringing them to places that look very different than Fargo, North Dakota, and we're bringing them to people that look very different than those that we see in our backyard. And so if we can't have the eyes for the people that are next to us, it certainly is going to complicate instead of help this idea of how do we serve people. And so from that, I birthed something called Homeless and Hungry. It was a 30-hour simulation for high school kids in which to fast for 30 hours, to sleep in a cardboard box outside in October, to let go of everything except for the clothes on your back and a sleeping bag to sleep with. And we would do these service projects and we would raise money. And it was this 30-hour life of empathy, because I think that empathy is this huge thing that people are missing in the world. We're so quick to turn off our TV sets or to take our picket fences and SUVs and drive past the world that desperately needs us. And so I would introduce these kids and eventually adults as well into this. And we set the goal, let's raise $10,000 doing this. And our first year we raised $63,000. We're like, oh, we're onto something. Like people are really fired up for this. My average kid raised $850, which is just a staggering amount of cash. Well, through the course of 5 years, I then rallied together 25 different churches and schools and universities in the area, and we raised over $1 million during that time. And it was a call into people developing as leaders, and it was a call to people having the heart to serve one another. And I recognized that my voice was best, not with me just figuring out how do I serve, but instead introducing people to a life of service and introducing them to people in their backyard and people around the world and everything else. And so I've now continued that through 2 different efforts, because I felt pretty empty in my real estate career when I was just trying to figure out how do I get rich. I felt pretty fulfilled when I figure out, how do I have a life of wealth? And wealth is what you get and what you give. It's the time that you have and the environment that you're in, and it's not just money. And so I, with my friend Nick out of Portland, Oregon, we started a nonprofit movement called Sell a Home, Save a Child, which is essentially introducing real estate professionals and lenders and title company representatives on how do they give a part of each of their transaction to the world that desperately needs their help. And from that, we've raised over $5 million throughout by simply giving voice to and telling people like, hey, do you want to give? And just inviting them to give and telling the story of the kids that are orphaned and the kids that need so much help. And from there, I now have partnered with a friend of mine who lives local here in Fargo. His name is Than, and he runs a nonprofit called Unseen. Unseen is fighting human trafficking and its root causes, and is partnered with people all over the world who are fighting human trafficking. Did you know, Aaron, right now there's over 50 million people trafficked throughout the world, and 12 million of them are kids. These kids are getting raped day in and day out. It's become the number 2 like black market thing. Drugs are number 1 still, but it's surpassed firearms as the number 2 thing, because you can sell a person over and over and over again. And it's just horrid. And I picture my daughter or my son in that situation, and it rips my heart out to the core. And so I recognize, like, as I introduce people to this, as they know of the world that is so dark and desperate, they know of the power that we have from the movement that we make and the action that we take, that my silence is agreement. And so I have to be loud, and I have to introduce people to and say, do you recognize that you have greatness inside of you, and that greatness is meant to impact and influence and help the world? And so we've raised millions and millions of dollars now to help fight human trafficking just in the last couple of years. And so every person I get a chance to talk to, if we're going to talk about what does tomorrow hold and who do we want to be and how do we make an impact, I'm going to help you to get wealthy, and I'm going to help you to get rich. And then I'm going to let you know the power that you have inside of you, and that world is going to get better when you choose to step into your power. So that's what's next.
That's incredible. Yes, I'm familiar with trafficking and some of the stats there. We've actually had Paul Hutchinson, the Sound of Freedom fame, and his story is just astounding. But the effort he's putting into ending trafficking is pretty amazing as well. We also had Brandon Turner on the show, who's now turned his life goal into reaching a donation level of $50 million per year to end trafficking. So it's a horrible, horrible thing that's going on that humans do to other humans. Another thing that I noticed there when you were talking about that is a recurring theme on the show is the hero's journey, and it's the hero has to go through the trial, has to go, go on the journey, slay the dragon, but in the end, it comes full circle in coming back to tell the story, to teach. And you learned how to make money. And you came back and you taught others how to make money. And then you learned how to serve. And now you're coming back full circle and teaching others how to serve. So that's you're completing your own hero's journey.
I love that. Thanks for sharing that.
Well, I tell you what, this has been an amazing conversation. I'd like to start bringing it in here, and we'll go into our final segment, which is the countdown to impact. And that's 3, 2, 1. 3 books, 2 quotes, and 1 person who have all made an impact in your life.
3 books. I'm gonna say, let me say The Infinite Game by Simon Sinek. That again has given me this mindset of where I'm going, what I'm doing. It's been really powerful. I'd be silly not to say the Bible. And so that obviously has had such an impact, and it's been a foundational piece for me. And then Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning has been, I read it in college in one of my religion courses, and it was just different. This idea of keeping purpose in what we do as a part of the infinite game with the heart of the Bible, like they for me, it's kind of all meshed into my DNA of who I want to be for this world. Two quotes. When my mom was on her deathbed, she had surgery at Mayo Clinic and was held upside down for 20 hours, operated on by 3 surgeons to try and save her life. And she got through the surgery, and I was able to talk to her the next day before she had a blood clot from complications of surgery that took her life. And the last thing my mom ever said to me as I walked into her room, and she was so drugged up and so swollen from everything. And I made a joke because my mom had started to collect angels in her life. And as she collected these angels, our whole house became inundated with like angels everywhere that we went. And I made a joke. I'm like, hey, your sister gave you an angel. I'm like, what are you going to do with another angel? And she took her oxygen mask off and she said, Erik, you can never have too many angels. And it was this thing of course I was completely wrecked and still am that I had lost her, but it was this idea, and it was this this piece that gave me an understanding that the game wasn't done yet. And so that was so valuable for me. The second quote that I ever got actually came from when my mom was first diagnosed with cancer. Although there's so many things that I could build upon to go to those like monumental pieces in life are huge. And I was meeting with my my mentor, and he was my youth pastor at church. And I was telling him, like, I don't know how I'm going to do all this. I'm so complicated. I was vice president of my university at the time, and I was in charge of my fraternity, and I worked 20 hours a week, and I was a full-time student and all these things. And I'm like, oh, I'm just going to, all these places need me. And he said, Hatch, I'm going to tell you something, and it's going to hurt, but it's the truth. He goes, you're not that important. Don't convey that with that you can't be influential and important, but he's like, you're just not that important. Because I thought the world revolved around me. And that was a quick call to the carpet to say, like, hey, listen, you can be used and you can be successful, but put your damn ego aside because you are not that important. So super valuable for me. And then the most influential person in my life, I'm going to say has been my father. And we talked about him a lot. It's easy to talk about the person that was there, but the person that I think impacted me the most in terms of the things to avoid, I got really clear of who I didn't want to be. And oftentimes when you step away from who you don't want to be, because you see how that makes you feel, you get that much closer to who you do want to be. And so I'm really grateful for the role my dad played in my life, even though at the time it wasn't who I wanted him to be. It was who he needed to be in order for me to live this life now. 3, 2, 1.
There you go. Excellent. Awesome answers, all of them. Love the book selection, and those quotes are fantastic. Final question is, if anybody wants to learn more, get in contact with you, how can they do that?
I live in my social media inboxes. It's the same as texting me or emailing me. And so Instagram is probably the best place to get connected. I'm at Real Erik Hatch. That's Erik with a K, Real Erik Hatch.
Awesome. We'll get that into the show notes. Erik, thank you so much for being on Point of Impact, and really appreciate it.
Oh, man, it's an honor to be here.